Hello, I'm Rajendran Narayanan and I teach in the School of Arts and Sciences in Azim Premji University. I'm part of the economics group and I've been running a curriculum called Data Democracy and Development. Uh, on the 25th of September, we had the 5 years of Aadhaar judgment and we had an event on campus along with Article 21 Trust on what the ramifications of the Aadhaar judgment has been on aspects of privacy and aspects of transparency. So in that regard, we have a special guest today, Chakradhar Buddha, also called Chakri, who is part of LipTech India, which works on questions of transparency and accountability in rural social policies. Chakri has a rich experience working on Adivasi rights, land rights, on questions of right to food, right to work, and he is involved with many such national campaigns on these issues. And in particular, he is also part of the national campaigns for people's right to information. And today, Chakri will show some light. We'll have a brief discussion on how Aadhaar has played a role in aspects of welfare from based on his experience of working in parts of Andhra Pradesh, especially in the Adivasi areas of Andhra Pradesh. So Chakri, a warm welcome to you to the university and for this discussion. I want to start by asking you about what do you think is the role that Aadhaar plays in many of these government schemes? Whether I'm talking about the so-called DBT schemes, the direct benefit transfer schemes. So if you could tell us a little bit about, if you can take an example of a particular scheme and tell us, that will be great.
Okay, thank you, Rajendran. See, Aadhaar story actually like reminds you of this, this Arab traveling with the camel and, sleeping in the tent. And in the morning he realizes he's outside the tent and the camel sort of occupied the whole tent. So Aadhaar story in direct benefit transfers is very similar. As of now, like if you look at any DBT, for instance, to cite an example, PM Kisan Samman Nidhi, for application, you would require your Aadhaar and your land record has to be digitalized and it has to be linked to your Aadhaar number. So it starts like at the level of registration and application only. And then Aadhaar has also like role to play in deciding whether it's only like one benefit going to your family. So there is this some database, each state has its own databases, but most of them they are centered around Aadhaars only to eliminate any two benefits going to like one family. And then at the third level you have also sort of Aadhaar being used as financial address for transfer. So from application to registration, validation and transfer, Aadhaar is sort of everywhere and it is same with most of the schemes as of now.
I see. So PM Kisan, for the viewers who are not familiar with that scheme, it's a cash transfer program for farmers where a total of 6,000 rupees is transferred to individual farmer's account and to a family of a farmer, and it goes in 3 installments of 2,000 rupees each. Just building on that, what is the states? The state has been promoting Aadhaar across different kinds of welfare programs in the country. So what do you think are the state's reason for promoting Aadhaar, or rather making sure Aadhaar is implemented across different schemes?
See, I mean, if you look at like state's narrative, it's not being consistent. From the beginning, it's being said that we are sort of introducing Aadhaar to weed out corruption, basically, and fake beneficiaries and all. But it's sort of refined over years. Now the state is sort of started saying Aadhaar is for good of the people. It will make the delivery of services easy for them, accessing of the services easy for them. So there's not one reason. But if you sort of dissect it and then dig deeper, you will realize mostly it is for the state's convenience, to put it in simple terms. State doesn't want to sort of invest too much on delivery at the last mile also. To give you an example, in the initial years of MGNREGA implementation, state was sort of spending 2% as commission at the last mile to make delivery of service easy. For instance, I am a worker. I worked for a couple of weeks and I'm supposed to get 1,000 rupees. Now the state sort of is spending 2% to see that I sort of receive my 1,000 rupees seamlessly. And that money sort of goes to either initially it was going to the SHG groups which were sort of disbursing these wages. I'm referring to AP, or you have these companies that also came. So now state is saying we don't have to spend that money at all. By using Aadhaar by default will make life easy, but on the ground, on the contrary, you don't see it actually like happening. Largely, it seems the state making life easy for the state in sort of transfer of some of these deliveries.
So that's an interesting point. You said the state is making life easy for the state. Now, the question is, you also alluded to the fact that it's not exactly playing out on the ground. If you can give any concrete example from your own work in Andhra Pradesh, if that would be very useful for us.
Okay. See, everyone knows that AP is sort of torchbearer in technology,
AP is
use
Andhra
of
Pradesh,
technology.
right?
Andhra Pradesh is sort of torchbearer in usage of technology, especially like Aadhaar technology. Even I think around 2014 only, like we made this grand statement saying that we are bringing 21 essential services in the state, under Aadhaar technologies to make life easy. So in a way, like we are much for like before everyone else. Even if you look at the Aadhaar based payment system, which is now widely being used in all DBTs, AP is sort of using it for a long time. So yeah. And now, like coming to your question, I would cite two examples. One is like on PM Kisan Samman Nidhi, because I sort of essentially my experience is very rooted in tribal areas. I could see like lot of misdirections happening in PM Kisan Samman Nidhi just because of Aadhaar. Like my land record is sort of seeded with some other, some other non-tribal random person's Aadhaar. So the money is sort of gone to that person. And what is alarming is like state doesn't even know, that something of this kind is happening at what scale. So I think on one hand, like state might say, ki, okay, we have sort of transferred benefits to like these many lakhs of people, but no one actually like really knows to how many people it has gone. In 2019, we found 16 to 24%
Wow.
of misdirections have actually happened in tribal areas of AP. I'm referring to one pocket of the tribal areas. That's one example. And the other example, which is I feel like very alarming and striking, is also like if you look at MGNREGA job card deletions.
So I'll just hold on to that because I want to focus a little bit on this PM Kisan question. When you say misdirection, it means that what is supposed to go to you is actually going to me.
Exactly.
It is almost like an accident.
Yeah.
Now, if it is an accident, why is it that the state is not able to recognize the extent of misdirections and do something about it?
See, I think we have to understand like how these designs do come. When you are like designing, then this whole gamut of things that sort of come with it. For instance, like you have an online application form that everyone would fill. So I'm a farmer, then I sort of approach the local official, and then that local official would fill in this form. And this form, no one knows like what is there, at that person's end. As a farmer, I don't have any idea. So my point is like, unless you have a broader and clearer understanding of this whole story of how Aadhaar linking has happened and how Aadhaar sort of being introduced at different milestones in the delivery system, it's difficult for the state also to sort of understand, because you are not prepared for it. You think like you have created a foolproof design. So obviously like it's very difficult for the state to sort of know.
So it's a question of lack of accountability in such a system, would you say that?
I mean, from the citizen's perspective, like it's 100% transparency and accountability issue. Because no one, I mean, the information is sort of not available at local level at all. For instance, even now, like if you look at PM Kisan Samman Nidhi, who all sort of received their benefits, like no one knows on the ground. The system might, at some record, they might write like, all the records should be there at the panchayat level, but no one bothers once the system gets completely digitalized. And secondly, like there's no one to ask. I mean, you forget about things like PM Kisan Samman Nidhi, even for legal guarantees, schemes which are under constitutional guarantees and legal guarantees also, there's no accountability.
But I'm going to push you a little bit here. So if I'm an administrator, one of the key questions that I have is that my money is being well spent, and rightly so, right? It's taxpayers' money. It should be well spent. So I will be careful and cautious about the fact that the money that is supposed to go to a farmer is actually not going to a person who's pretending to be a farmer. So for me, linking the farmer's land account with their Aadhaar, isn't that a way for me to ensure that the money is going to that person?
See, I mean, I agree that every official who sort of designing the system would be sort of thinking about it. But the complexity of digital systems is such that you don't know like where these cracks are. After like many a times you will realize, because these are like evolving systems, and you have made a huge compromise on the ground in terms of transparency and accountability. These things go on cropping up. For instance, for any official who is sort of designing the system, they don't want to invest anything on the local systems, offline systems. For instance, many of these issues would have avoided if you sort of start pasting the beneficiaries' names in panchayats. Thereby, like people would have seen and would have complained. But because you want to sort of prove that these digital systems are working, many a times you sort of pretend that these problems are not there. One. Number two, like even if you want to also, these are so complex, it's difficult for you to sort of even know. So it's not, I mean, many a times we actually like believe that these systems are very disempowering to communities only, which is true. But at the same time, in my experience, I have seen they are equally disempowering to even the top level officials who have designed these systems.
Okay.
So that is something that many people don't
Can
know.
you exemplify? Can you give a little bit on that?
Yeah, for instance, like when we found these many thousands of farmers' entitlements have gone to got misdirected. During our conversations with top level officials, we realized like they are completely blind. They don't know that they were caught by surprise that these things can happen even in these so-called sophisticated digital systems, which have come with the promise that we will weed out corruption completely.
So how did you find out? If the state with all its machinery cannot find out misdirections, how did you find out?
I mean, it's difficult to explain, but I think on principle level, having your eyes on the ground, just watching what is happening on the ground, I think is the key.
So you physically went
Yeah,
to those?
we sort of, as LipTech, we believe in sort of embedding ourselves very strongly on the ground, understanding what all happening, and especially like looking at, how people are sort of interacting with these digital systems. I think how that interaction is playing out is critical part of our work.
So if
I
you
think
if you
that is
can take an example, let's say you take a printout from the online and you physically verified and found out, what was the process?
Okay, I mean, we use different processes, but to give you as an example, we sort of, innovating on this whole idea of social audits. We sort of take out all the digital systems data or data on MIS, and then like go on verifying on the ground, trying to understand like how this digital story is sort of playing out on the ground, and trying to sort of look at the gaps. And we also sort of put a lot of value and emphasis on the experience of the local officials. I think that's also being very key, which is widely neglected in the in exploration and understanding of digital systems. Because if they are disempowered, then obviously it will have an impact on how they are sort of delivering the services to citizens. So it's like combination.
I remember a particular case you had mentioned about a farmer in an Adivasi village in Paderu ITDA, but the payment had gone to some Sheikh Hasina, no, not Sheikh Hasina, some other person like that.
Yeah, I mean, that name is sort of legendary everywhere we go. I mean, Sheikh Mirabi, I don't know who that person is, with due apologies to her. Yeah, it was suddenly like when I saw the list, then I found that name in this remote tribal village with only like particularly vulnerable tribal groups. And they haven't seen a Muslim person in their lives. And I still remember when I went and asked people, when I said Muslim, then they were like, what is Muslim? So that level of, like isolation the village is. And we found like a lot of these strange names in that list. But one could ask, like, if the
When you
names
say
are so obvious,
strange meaning that they
like
are
non-tribal
non-tribal
names,
names.
yeah, non-tribal upper caste names in the list. But then the question comes is like, but then if the names are so obvious, then someone would have seen them, right? But interesting part is like no one have seen them because they are sort of embedded in some remote login of some block official who doesn't have the login credentials, who never looked at all the reports because there are so many. So, I mean, my point is like, forget about all of this. If the state would have decided to sort of paste the names of all the beneficiaries in the village, I think that would have sort of solved the whole problem. Then the question is like how Sheikh Mirabi sort of entered the system, right? Very simple. Like 5 years down the line in 2014, when then the chief minister then was adamant that he want all the land records to be digitalized and also all land account numbers are linked with Aadhaar, then by giving like unrealistic deadlines of 15 days, no human being can sort of collect Aadhaar numbers of all the farmers in tribal areas considering how remote they are, how impossible the terrain is. One third of the villages don't have road accessibility, no transportation, no phone network. Then like they just went around and then they collected Aadhaar numbers of whoever they came across. We have evidence to show that actually Aadhaar numbers are even like bought and then like seeded with this. And the state is only like looking at this larger number, how much percentage of Aadhaar seeding is done. And yeah.
Yeah, so it's a very important question that you point out, very important idea of what is the principle of transparency. It's not just numbers in a database to show compliance, but actually whether the people for whom it's intended is actually reaching them. So you're actually questioning the very edifice of the structure of Aadhaar which is implemented here. Now I'm going to draw an attention to a couple of other things. You mentioned about pasting the list of people in the village who actually got their payments in Narega. And I think there is an intervention by LibTech in Telangana which was done. And that, could you just share a little bit of your experience with that?
Yeah, see, I mean, for the state, actually, like the story ends when the money reaches the bank account of the workers or like whichever account they are sort of using. But then, like, what happens afterwards is the big question. With our, embedding ourselves in the field areas, then we know that there are like a lot of issues at the last mile. People find a lot of difficulties in accessing their payments. One small example is like they don't know whether the money has reached their account or not. So they had to like make multiple rounds to the banks, and every time they had to go to bank, then they had to like miss their wages of that day, and also spend some money in transportation. So all those losses they bear. So and also like then the state is saying nahi, but we have introduced this new system where people can go and then collect cash from this customer service points or business correspondents, so they don't have to go to these brick mortar bank structures which are far. But even that, even if I go to like BC or CSP, then the issue is like I don't know how much money is deposited in my bank account because there is no system of bank passbook updation that is available at the level of CSP or BC. So to address this problem, we introduced this thing where we were continuously like supplying this information in villages on last 15 days, how many of you have received your Narega payments, for which work you have received payment, how much money you have received payment, and in some cases to which bank account the money has gone. So that, people now know. And that is being studied by professors from University of Manchester and few more. And what they found, it's a proper random control trial study that they have done, and they found actually that it sort of worked fantastically well. People's sort of their hardships have come down largely, and this is a very low cost intervention. We were like spending about 10 rupees for each of the time that we want to sort of paste this information in villages. So it's a very low cost
So this
intervention.
is something that the states can easily incorporate in their in their program functioning. And
Exactly.
as per your experience, you're saying it led to savings, and it leads to a lot of improvement in the functioning of the state, which is good for the state too. which is what the state wants. Now, just drawing on your work on Narega as well, there was a recent paper co-authored by you and Lavanya Tamang, where you talk about deletions of job cards. This was published in the Economic and Political Weekly, and where you talk about high rate of deletions of job cards in order to meet Aadhaar-based payments compliance. Can you just reflect a little bit on what that study was and what did you find and why is it important?
See, one strange thing, I think, narrative that one could see is like every time I think questions are asked on Aadhaar and also like imposition of Aadhaar in, all these social protection programs, the state's response is always been to make it more complex and make for people. For instance, Aadhaar payment system has been like criticized heavily for a long time for multiple reasons. From the citizen perspective, to give one very striking criticism is like the onus of repairing the problem rests solely with the citizen in Aadhaar payment system, whereas in the account payment system, which is in vogue previously, like the responsibility rests with the state. So now the state would say, like, even if I am not getting my money, then the state would say, but it's your responsibility. Like, I did what all I can do. But considering like the poor infrastructure we have and also like, the digital literacy and also the complexity of the Aadhaar technologies, we have found like it's very complex for the people to go and deal with their own problems. And even at the level of, banks who are supposed to sort of fix this problem, they are completely clueless about this whole system. So to address this, like government has made it more complex. Now they are saying, if I worked in Narega and if I have to like receive my payments, then government is saying I have to fulfill 3 conditions. Number 1, I had to like link my job card with my Aadhaar, step 1. Step 2 is like my name on Aadhaar should exactly like match with my name on job card, number 2, which they are like calling it as Aadhaar authentication. And then the third thing they are saying is like my bank account should be linked with Aadhaar and also NPCI mapper. Like little complex to explain, but in simple terms, it is a sort of mapping that would allow technologically money to reach my bank account. So these 3 things had to be fulfilled. Now, like we don't know like who decided this. Last year, Union government sort of issued a circular. Department of MEIT IT has written to all the different departments of the Union government saying from now onwards, all the cash transfers should follow this Aadhaar payment system only. What is the rationale and basis? It's not being explained in that circular. So taking cue from that, like in Narega also, it sort of made it, all the states are sort of pushed to convert from Aadhaar, account payment system to Aadhaar payment system. So on the ground, we are sort of watching this for almost like an year, and we found, it is made compulsory, but there is no like capacity building of the local functionaries, no support systems are in place. So they found the easy way out to deal with this piling up of Aadhaar compliances is to sort of delete workers. So they sort of started deleting it. And I think one striking thing to note here is Andhra being in the forefront of Aadhaar technologies, being the torchbearer of Aadhaar technologies, is very high on deletions. So it says something. And also, see, one should also recognize like Andhra is the only state in the country which has like 100% Aadhaar payment system already in vogue. So even then, it couldn't sort of comply with these compliances, and you will find about 78 lakh workers getting deleted in just 1 year.
Wow.
And in overall, like at national level, we have about 5.2 crore deletions that have happened of Narega workers. And I think if you have to like look at the 18 months data from 2022 April 1st to September end, it's about like I think 6 crores or something. And if people are thinking like after all the noise that is being made by the civil society groups on deletions, the deletions haven't stopped even now. The last deadline that is being given is like August end by Union government. They sort of revised it now to the December end. But even like last week of August, we could see about 4.5 lakh workers getting deleted, because every time there is a deadline, there is this huge deletions that were sort of happening.
So, just to clarify, deletions would mean that a job card holder, which is a person who has the right to work, their right to work has been taken away by the state. So, it's a violation of the right to work. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we all know like MGNREGA is a legal guarantee of 100 days of work. So by like deleting my name from the roles, basically like my right to work is sort of violated.
That's a huge thing.
Yeah. So Aadhaar, if you look at like Aadhaar, that is what it does. I mean, it sort of overrides all the constitutional and legal guarantees, which I sort of said in the beginning.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask one last question here, drawing, because you've been saying Andhra Pradesh has been the torchbearer of technology interventions in welfare. Now, there's also, I'm going to draw upon a book called Patching Development by Rajesh Veer Raghavan, where he takes a specific example of a bureaucrat who is a Dalit bureaucrat, and there is this kind of high modernist intervention which actually worked in that specific context. Now, if you can zoom out a little bit, there was that was an example of centralization which worked. Now, but we are seeing a lot of centralization through the use of technology in different aspects, not just in NREGA, but different aspects of welfare. Now, where do you see this going? Do you think what is the, and if you can just reflect a little bit on political capacities, which Jenkins and Menor talk about in their book, of political capacities of rights holders in this, pitting it with centralization. What is the future?
I mean, see, centralization, like what we are witnessing is like growing centralization. Like every day, I think service delivery like getting more and more centralized. I think referring back to the Andhra model, yes, I mean it worked to that extent. But I feel, see, the inherent problem with centralization model is like it sort of treats the higher officials as holier than thou, and then the local ones to be extremely corrupt, and also that the premise is problematic, I would say. And of course, Andhra is a special case because we don't have strong panchayat raj system in place. So you can't just leave it to panchayats, everything, because the system is already weak and it doesn't have that capacity to sort of manage many of these programs. So, yeah, and then, I mean, in general, I think it depends on like what do you want. If you just want to sort of show that we are like reaching out to these many people with benefits, then to some extent perhaps centralization can be justified. But my point is like most of these programs are not about just simple transfer of money, it's about empowering communities. And if you sort of look at it that way, I think centralization does more damage than good. Because you are not actually like leaving any space for the communities to sort of come together, demand something at the local level, because the local systems are completely disempowered.
So in a way, you're saying that the bargaining power of people, or the ability to form federations and argue for their rights, that is depleting.
Yeah,
is that a fair
of course. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Chakri, for joining us today. It was a pleasure talking to you.